March's scrutiny meeting. We've had one apology from Councillor Fox and Councillor Kane is subbing, so welcome. Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. We've got the minutes of the meeting, or two meetings, 23rd of January and the 30th of January. Are people happy that they are accurate and I can sign those off? Lots of nods and agreements. Actually, Jan probably wants a formal vote on that, do you? Yeah, Jan. All those in favour of those minutes, please show. Any against? Abstentions? No, they are carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move on to the main item, which is the Norfolk and Suffolk devolution consultation draft City Council response. So I'll hand over to, I think, Emma, you'll just outline the report for us and then we'll move on to some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So yeah, we'll just provide a really sort of high level overview of the Norwich City Council's draft response to the government's consultation on Norfolk and Suffolk devolution proposals as set out in Appendix A of the report, and then I think we'll open up for debate and then seek your recommendations ahead of Cabinet's final consideration on the 2nd of April. So just a bit of background. So the government is consulting on establishing a mayoral combined county authority, or MCCA, across Norfolk and Suffolk. The government will determine whether this arrangement will improve social, economic and environmental well-being, whether it will deliver effective and convenient local government and reflect local identities and interests. And if agreed, we would see a mayoral election in May 2026, and the indicative timeline suggests that we would perhaps have a decision as to the devolution proposals autumn of this year. In terms of the scope of the consultation, there are 7 questions which focus on the governance arrangements, which I'll touch on in a moment, and its potential impact on social outcomes, the economy, the environment and local services, as I just said. And it's worth noting that while local government reorganisation, or LGR, is not part of this consultation, it obviously remains an important context for our response. And so the submission that is going to government tomorrow, that I know you debated on Tuesday, is sort of well woven into our draft response. I've just got a couple of slides on some of the key response points. So the draft response supports the principle of an MCCA and the opportunity that devolution brings. However, we are very clear that the benefits for Norwich will hinge on the governance arrangements and ensuring that our decision-making influence is secured. We've emphasised that local decision makers are best placed to shape policy and deliver services effectively, and we've stressed that every principal authority should hold a voting seat on the MCCA board during the transition period, so between May 26 and May 28, ensuring that we have a seat at the table and that there are diverse perspectives that are heard and fair representation. We've been clear that these opportunities for Norwich could be lost if we do not have a strong voice at the table. We've underlined the importance of devolution amplifying the potential of Greater Norwich as an economic powerhouse for the region, and our response emphasises that urban centres like Norwich are critical to driving regional and national growth, as well as helping to support driving up living standards. At the same time, we note that strategic collaboration must be balanced with maintaining genuinely local government and avoiding the creation of large, distant mega councils. Our response highlights that working across this broader geography offers potential to strengthen environmental outcomes through coordinated action and long-term strategic planning, but success depends on getting the size and the structure of local government right, so it remains connected to communities while contributing effectively to regional solutions. And we also stress that community identities and local needs must be embedded in the MCCA decision making. So larger structures can only be effective if they still allow meaningful local representation and service delivery remains connected to community priorities. So just to sort of recap on what the proposed governance arrangements are, and these are set out in the appendices to the report, Appendix B, I believe. So the proposed transition governance model grants 2 votes each for Norfolk and Suffolk County Councils and 1 vote for the elected mayor. Non-constituent, so i.e. non-voting members may be appointed, but they would only have voting rights at the MCCA board's discretion. And we are asking government as part of our response to increase the number of non-constituent members and grant them voting rights on matters directly impacting their area. And my understanding is that district colleagues are making the same ask in their responses as well. And then looking ahead to with LGR in mind, new unitary councils would become full voting members of the combined authority. And as you're aware, Norwich is committed to developing a strong business case for a unitary authority for Greater Norwich to ensure that our urban priorities are properly represented. As I say, that was discussed on Tuesday at full council and endorsed. So just in conclusion, quickly, before we look at the questions in more detail, I think it's worth highlighting that there is a risk without proper representation for Norwich that the combined authority will lack urban focus and that could diminish its potential impact. Conversely, this is an opportunity to design structures that work for all communities, rural, urban and coastal. And so we are asking government to seize that opportunity. As I said at the beginning, following discussion today, Cabinet will consider the draft response on the 2nd of April ahead of our submission in line with the Consul closing date of the 13th of April.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Emma. I'll pivot to members in a minute for questions. So what I'm proposing to do is we'll go straight to Appendix A and we'll take each of the question responses one at a time. Ask some questions, possibly make any recommendations, get those out of the way, and then double back if there's any general points. But before I do that, I just wondered, Councillor Stannard, did you have anything as leader that you wanted to sort of have the committee aware of at this stage?
No, I don't think so. I've spoken extensively at full council and also at Cabinet last night, so I think I've said all that needs to be said.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, in that case, we'll move on to page 23 in your report, question 1, which is to what extent do you agree or disagree that establishing a mayoral combined county authority over the proposed geography will deliver benefits to the area? So this is an opportunity to ask questions focused around that question, and then we'll, if there aren't any, we'll move on to the next one. So is there anyone have any points to make on that? Councillor Davis. So is there, I just want to double check there's nothing else from questions. I wanted to do them a question at a time. So is there, yeah, I didn't know if there's anyone else who had anything to say. It's say on question 1. Does anyone have anything to say on question 1?
So whether this is a change or not, but it is good to have strategic planning, but it needs proper devolution with democratic governance and accountability throughout, not just every 4-year election. But I don't know, I mean, that's probably structural with the problem with the whole thing. So, I mean, that would be, I don't know how we weave that in. Yeah, I'm not sure how we can weave that in positively.
Okay, thank you. Any other points or questions on question 1? Councillor Padder, question 1. Establishing a mayoral combined county authority. So we're looking at that, the text for that response at the moment on page 23.
Oh,
I mean, presumably we, well, speaking for officers here, but we as a council can't respond on behalf of the Broads Authority because this is the Norwich response to this consultation. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. So when we held the engagement sessions here last week, only last week, I think, we invited colleagues from the Broads Authority, and we have shared the details of the consultation with all of those partners and stakeholders, and referred them to it and said, please make a representation. So we've done that work. Over the coming months, we'll do much more work in terms of engagement and alignment with partners. We've done no more than that with the Broads Authority, as far as I'm aware at the moment. Emma?
Not for this, no. I think, as you say, Lou, that will come when we do the full business case for local government reorganisation. But on the devolution, as Councillor Wright said, we're just looking at it from our submission and our response as a council.
So any further points on the proposed geography delivering benefits? I think Councillor Smith was first, then Councillor Sands.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Potentially a very small, maybe pernickety one, but in the second paragraph of the answer, where it says to deliver the full potential devolution has to offer, crucial that decision-making processes and governance arrangements generally collaborative. Principal authorities must be meaningfully involved and engaged, ensuring that diverse perspectives are considered and that all areas of the county are fairly represented. As we're talking about Norfolk and Suffolk, should that be changed to be of the proposed morality or whatever it is with the MCCA? That's the first one. Just another, I know we agree with it. Again, maybe pedantic question. Most of the text seems to be very positive. I just wonder why we don't strongly agree with it rather than just agree. Or is that because we obviously don't want to give the government too much of a free hand in thinking what they've proposed is great? But just on my reading, it seems mostly a positive response.
That's an interesting point on the strongly agree. It's like, so how did I only get 4.5 stars for being a passenger in an Uber? Yeah.
Thank you. We can certainly make your point in regard to the county clearer, so that's fine. And I think in terms of suggesting that we agree, I think it's because a lot of our response is hinged on obviously what happens with LGR and whether we are invited to be a non-constituent member. So I think because there's still some unknowns, we felt that it would be prudent to go for agree as a strongly agree.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sands, you had a geography item for question for item 1, yes?
Yeah. I was looking at the section that Councillor Smith was looking at, also looking at the third paragraph, which it talks about a vote at the table. And I don't think it's simply a question of a vote at the table, because not all authorities currently are equal. Norwich represents 140,000 plus people, last count. So a vote for 140,000 people seems to be somewhat underrepresented. So I really think that there should be some sort of stronger element or weighting to the position of Norwich, in going forward to the unit. When we eventually get the unitaries, we are the biggest authority in the county, population-wise, economic-wise, and employment-wise. The rest is sort of a rural mass, basically, with a few little towns scattered around.
Yeah. Thank you. If anyone wants to respond to that, it was Councillor Stannard.
I mean, under the mayoral combined authority, when it's established, then the government has made it very clear that each unitary will be represented, and we're looking at unitaries in Norfolk of roughly the same size, starting off around 300,000, rising to 350,000. So I think the time at which that comes it's been stated by government that it will be 1 per unitary, and Suffolk are going for 3 unitaries as well. That's important because we want to make sure that Norfolk and Suffolk have equal representation. So it's a fair point, Mike, but I don't think the government are going to allow that to happen in that way.
Can I just follow up? But isn't this an interim vote before the unitaries come forward? Because it means that Norwich's position is diminished in terms of the rest of the county, and I think that's a great concern. We should push, I believe, to have a greater say in that interim period, because then it strengthens our position when it comes forward to I mean, I realise that, you know, when we have the 3 unitaries and Norwich will be on extended boundaries, they'll all be approximately equal in terms of population. Norwich will still have primacy in terms of economics and all sorts of other things, but I do think we should push for a greater say in the interim period.
So in that interim period, under current legislation, it will be the county council that's driving the process. And obviously there'll be the mayor. We don't know what political flag stripe they will be, but the rules have been stated are clear, that there'll be the basic membership from the 2 counties, and then some the possibility of some discretion being used. But how that discretion is used is not clear. You might co-opt a police and crime commissioner. You might, it doesn't necessarily have to be a district. So I think what we're pushing for is to try and ensure that both Norwich and Ipswich are represented, but we're going to have to fight for that. So I think getting any more than that is probably unlikely.
I think we're straying slightly into what was the next question. I think Councillor Davis was going to come in, but Lou, you wanted to just say something?
Thank you, Chair. And I think Councillor Stannard's almost made the point that I was going to make, which is that the framework of primary legislation that creates mayoral authorities is already in existence and clearly sets out how constituent membership will be made up and how constituent votes will be allocated, and it's not a proportional system. So we're not able to influence that in our consultation response because it would need a change to primary legislation.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, we're now on to question 2 now.
In the request, for at least a minimum percentage of non-constituent members to be from districts. There's absolutely no guarantee any districts will be on. We're asking for them to increase, but we're not asking for this to be, at least a proportion of those.
Yeah, I think one of I'll bring you in a second. One of my I think concerns about the process, particularly with regard to the governance here, is we're looking at this 2028 for the new unitaries. 5 members, so the mayor will be elected next year, but the 2 members from each of the 2 county councils will be county councillors whose mandate was given to them back in 2021 and will be way past its sell-by date at that point. I think that's the concern about leaving it, and I appreciate the point about primary legislation, but that's the concern about leaving it where we'll have had elections at that point to shadow authorities. We ought to be going through a process of lobbying to say that those shadow authority members should then form the basis of effectively replacing those county councillors. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. I just wanted to agree with that and say that there needs to be a more inclusive governance model for us required from the outset at design and set up stage, and subsequently. I understand what you're saying, but we could also put, rather than, I think we've got neither agree nor disagree there. Could we strengthen that to disagree a bit on this one? If we, just sometimes we're sort of sitting on the fence a bit. on that one, because there are issues, clear issues, aren't there, that are being raised here. So I think we don't neither agree or disagree on it. We actually probably have some concerns, and they're reflected in the answer.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I'll go for Councillor Sands, then Councillor Davis.
Yeah, the statement in the notes which says, I've lost it now. The MCCA would see decision making exercised by 4 constituent members representing the councils of Norfolk County Council and Suffolk County Council. Again, that to me seems to be somewhat imbalanced, because who are those 4 representatives going to be? If they are, depending on where they're from, they're going to be exercising a certain sort of bias, which is going to disadvantage some areas of the county, the city, Ipswich. It doesn't seem to me to be a very good approach.
Councillor Davis. Thank you. It's very helpful. Are there any more points on governance, which is question 2 in the response, or shall we move on to supporting the economy of the area, which is question 3? Question 3 then. Our response to what extent do we agree or disagree that working across the proposed geography, blah, 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 will support the economy of the area? Councillor Capp.
I think my one comment on this, and it's kind of something that goes across all of local government reorganisation and devolution, is that the economic benefits that I think we're all saying are going to be there aren't tangible at the moment. No one knows what they are. No one has any idea what funding is actually going to come and whether that funding will actually replace the loss of funding that we've had for the past 14 years. So I think something in our response about giving us a little bit more certainty about actually how we're going to solve some of the massive challenges that local government faces are just what is completely missing in all of the talk from the government about devolution and local government reorganisation. And just a little bit more certainty, literally anything that they could tell us would be helpful.
Thank you. Any other points or comments on questions on the economy or economic benefits of this? Councillor Galvin.
I suppose it may come later on, sorry, but the how they'll actually how deprived areas will benefit from a mayoral county authority would be good to. We got that.
Yeah, the next question looks at social outcomes.
So that, yeah, so it's just we link it, don't we, with geography ourselves, but it is linked with economy, really. But I suppose that's just the way they've done the consultation. Okay.
Oh, Councillor Smith, I think you were first, then Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. In the second to last paragraph in the answer, talks about each city plays a role in driving growth, and then the second sentence starts with our global strength lies in our diversity of place. I can kind of see what that paragraph's getting at about, you know, how vital cities are, and like cities like Norwich are to the UK economic growth, and how that makes the UK globally competitive. It's just the way the word global appears in that second sentence. It seems to jump from talking about the local, then talking about the global, and just suggest maybe a little bit of rewording around that, perhaps, just to refocus our answer on why Norwich is such a special place and why this new proposed governance will enhance Norwich, and then that will in turn contribute to the whole country's thriving. And just then going to kind of note on the final part of the answer concludes using the phrase UK PLC, just which I'm personally really not a fan of the phrase UK PLC. So I don't think describing a country as a private limited company is that effective or really means a great deal. But other than that, I should preface that with saying thank you to officers for all the hard work you put into this, because it's obviously far better than anything I could do. But yeah, just 2 kind of points on those areas there to consider.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor Sands, then Councillor Padder, then I had Councillor Galvin, then Councillor Catt.
Yeah, looking at the same paragraph as Councillor Smith, the third sentence there, I think I would have opened the paragraph with that sentence. The UK economy thrives when its cities thrive, ensuring that Norwich has the right governance structure is not just a local issue, but a national imperative. And then I would follow on with the rest of that paragraph, because I think that's the key sentence in that paragraph.
Thank you. What I should say is I don't propose that this committee will be acting as a collaborative drafting body, but I'm sure officers will take on board some of the comments that they're hearing. Thank you. Councillor Padder.
Be quite nice to be a bit more focused on that. That makes sense. I don't think I've read myself very well, but
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Galvin, please.
Yeah, I presume that the wording used it reflects what's used in our bid, isn't it? So UK PLC is used in our submission. So I guess it gets a bit dangerous if you start trying to change individual words now. And I guess as other officers will be able to say this, but it's probably a coherence that you're aiming for here. I mean, I'm not a fan of it either. In fact, it makes my flesh crawl UK PLC, but I'm sure it's what the government wants to hear, and that's why it's there.
Does anyone wish to comment on that?
Probably just to confirm where the UK PLC originated from. I've been advised it's used through the Fast Growth Cities network. That's what they refer to, and we're a fast growth city. So I think, and as you say, Councillor Galvin, it does appear in our interim plan. So we've tried to be consistent where possible.
What's the phrase? Playing to the gallery, I think. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Catt.
Yeah, following on from what I was saying before, and rereading the response to question 3, I think it feels more appropriate for us to say neither agree or disagree, because I don't think we have any certainty from government that we will actually get any economic growth out of this. Local government is in crisis, and county council services are in a much worse place than we are at district level. And so I just don't think we can say with certainty that we agree that we're going to get this magical economic growth from devolution when we haven't actually been given any reason to necessarily believe that, or certainty about what funding will come when, or any information about it.
Thank you. Councillor Davis. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see who was it Lou? Sorry.
I was just going to make the point that's local government reorganisation. Of course, this is devolution, and the funding for devolution will come through that central funding pot. The debt issue with county. Yeah, there will be a set of powers and some funding that comes with that set of powers that will be given to this new authority to drive economic growth.
And that's presumably, to use the phrase, new money. Then is it existing money that's being effectively devolved downwards from Whitehall?
I don't think we know whether it's new money or repackaged money or devolved money, or a mixture.
Okay.
Yeah, don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Fulton-McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. So I was going to make a similar point about other devolution deals ultimately having devolved money from central government to us, and where the economic growth comes from, generally speaking, is that rather than deciding that dualling the A11 is a key priority, we may locally have decided that actually dualling, for example, the A47 might have been a better priority for actually ensuring that there was an ability for Yarmouth, as an example, to be a bigger import hub than it currently is. So there are local decisions like that which we can make with a viewpoint of what would benefit local growth versus what the government's priorities are, and various local MPs who happen to be government ministers pushing the A11, for example. Now, I do agree with dualling the A11, but that's an example of where we could have reprioritised that money and had a decision on that locally, rather than it being down to government ministers. In terms of the changing this to neither agree nor disagree, ultimately a bit of counterbalance there is that we want devolution to happen as an authority. We all believe in devolution happening, and what we don't want to do is to essentially put our devolution case into the too difficult box by presenting too many obstacles to it. That would be my stance. I wouldn't want to throw spanners in the works where they're not necessary. Ultimately, all of these, we could say neither agree nor disagree, because it depends on who has power and what they're going to do with power. But I think we've got to be optimistic in this situation.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Shall we move on? Oh, Councillor Padder.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. That work will come. Some work has been done previously by our county council colleagues, because of course they were looking at a devolution deal previously with a directly elected leader. So there's been a substantial amount of work that's already been done around what that model might have looked like, what those funding pots might have looked like. But as you've rightly identified here, that was based on the previous deal, the previous funding. So there is a lot of work that's already done. I think once funding levels are known, once powers are established, then that work will be picked up again and looked at.
Thank you. Shall we move on to question 4 now, which is improving social outcomes? Councillor Davis. Thank you.
So in terms of an equality impact assessment, we're in the process of drafting a high-level one for devolution, and then obviously a subsequent one which will be more detailed for our local government reorganisation submission. So obviously Following this week, we will then move into the next phase of the full business case development. And as we drive forward those various work streams, there'll be equality considerations developed as part of that work. I think for our interim submission, obviously this isn't in regard to that, but for our interim submission, we have looked at data where it has been available at LSOA level, but I think there's quite a lot of inconsistencies where that information is available and where it isn't. So it's sort of work in progress, really.
Mm.
I mean, we're working on it collectively, so. Well, from a district perspective, we're working with other Norfolk districts on our LGR submission. Suffolk are working on theirs, and obviously, do you want to come in on anything else on that, Lou?
No, just to reaffirm what you said. So across Norfolk, the districts are working together using data and information to establish business case kind of proposals, and of course, for the submission that's almost ready to go. Yeah. Suffolk are doing a similar piece of work. Okay, yeah. I would imagine they're doing the same. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Fulton McAllister.
Thank you. So, which I'm just going to brain dump, and whoever's sensible can pick up for different parts. I think this is really important to understand, and I may have missed it, but it's not clear whether we're commenting on the proposed geography of the MCCA in its entirety from our perspective, or whether we're commenting just on behalf of our residents or the larger authority that we will make up. But I think and not to be too nakedly political about this, I think it is going to have huge social benefits to the residents that we take in, because we will be a progressive council. It will be a council which has strong Labour, strong Green, strong Lib Dem representation on it, with any luck, from all of our perspectives. But also it's that in itself is going to mean that we can prioritise those in most social need, which is the inclination of certainly everyone around this table. And I don't know if that's going to be helpful to highlight, because there are huge amounts of rural poverty that don't get addressed by the current district and county councils, which will be addressed through the new council that is created partially with our own geography in mind.
Then want to pick up those comments?
I just think, you know, that the unitary model with a single council having responsibility for housing, social care, children's services, education, there's a whole range of environmental health, all those things which are the key determinants of people's health and well-being, their health status and their social status, and being able to manage those, coordinate them together in order to improve educational attainment, include life chances, get proper skills training in place so that people can, when they leave school, can get further skills training to get into a decent job. All of those things, and ensuring that they got decent, affordable housing as well. All of those things are the core determinants of people's health and well-being. So it presents a tremendous opportunity. And Matthew is right. In order to realise that opportunity, you've got to have a progressive council. And I think from the geography we're talking about for the Greater Norwich area, we would get a progressive council.
Lou and then Emily, or Emily and then Lou.
Sorry, we're both fighting to be the one to speak. I just think it's really important that we just remind ourselves that we're talking about the mayoral combined county authority here, rather than the reorganised local councils. So in terms of the question that you asked, the geography that we're looking at is that whole geography across Norfolk and Suffolk, but the response that we're giving is Norwich City Council's response on behalf of the residents of Norwich. So we're kind of looking at that wider piece, but through the lens of our residents' interests. I think this particular question about social outcomes is slightly confusing, because a lot of that social impact actually comes in that that conversation about LGR and the right structure for unitary authorities. But some of the functions that would sit with the mayoral authority include things like adult education and skills, housing, educational outcomes, and improved social wellbeing. So those are the kind of things that I think we should be focusing on in terms of our response to this particular question. So I think just holding that in our mind about which structure we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll just bring.
Could I
yeah,
come back
bring you
in
back
on
yeah.
that specifically in relation to that comment, Emily? In which case, if that's the case with it specifically being about the MCCA in mind, is it not worth highlighting that by having the leaders of the unitaries involved in those things, there can be that better tie-in to deliver those better social outcomes? Can that be included? Thank you.
Lou.
Yeah, just very quickly, I was going to make that point as well, Matthew. What happens with all of these questions is you kind of circle back round to that point that Emma pointed out in her presentation, the risk. What the MCCA needs is the right representation. And that has to be from the city and from the other unitaries, from the word go.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Strategic planning, they'll be driving bricks and mortar. The other thing I was going to ask is will we have any officers who are able to attend these meetings from districts? I mean,
Yes, thank you. Just checking with the oracles. Am I right? Yes, chief execs will attend with the leaders of the representative authorities as observers, not voting rights, of course, as observers. And I would imagine that other officers will be kind of invited along when there are papers and proposals that are relevant to different authorities and different disciplines.
Thank you. Any other points on our response to social outcomes, question 4, or shall we move on to question 5, which I've now lost? Question 5, improving local government services. So do we have any views on whether the MCCA will help us improve local government services? Over to you. Yeah. No, well, but in terms of our response then, I mean, it's one of the shorter responses. And yeah, well, it is, because actually, until you know what LGR looks like, you don't know how the MCCA is going to impact on that. And you know, the response alludes to that. So yeah, I think the response is as you can write at this stage, I think. So did you have something you want to say? Oh, 6. Okay, we'll crack on to 6 then, about the natural environment and overall national environment. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, so that 6 is the natural environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
an overall national environment.
I think this one we agree on, but some of the wording is a bit suspect. The North Sea hydrocarbon transition, carbon capture, usage and storage, hydrogen, solar energy and nuclear new build. The region's well placed to drive clean energy innovation, because carbon capture and storage and nuclear don't actually drive clean energy innovation. In fact, they divert money away from known cheaper technologies. So that's more about technology choice than devolution, perhaps. But I think it's a bit dangerous to start talking about those in here under improve the local natural environment. Carbon capture and storage will definitely not improve the local natural environment, not with nuclear. So I think we've gone a bit too far into particular technologies. They're unproven technologies, very expensive technologies. And I don't see why we're doing that at that stage when there are proven existing technologies. And the other point I wanted to make on this, I think it's got to come in somewhere, and Complete raised it, really, the protected landscapes in Norfolk. So the Broads National Park and Norfolk Coast National Landscape are both at the moment sitting at the county level, and I don't understand if they're going to go to mayoral, because whatever happens with LGR, they're going to be split. I think some of them, there'll be lines going through them, but they are statutory bodies. So I'd appreciate it if you'd ask a question at some stage what's happening to our protected landscape. Will they go to, I haven't been able to find them. And presumably they would come in this answer. So would it be appropriate to ask the question, or to at least mention our protected landscapes?
Any
And some
comment?
ones too.
We can take that way and have a look into that. Yeah, and I'm just on your previous point. I think this answer was sort of discussed with other districts and environmental colleagues. So again, we can go back and check them as well.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, then Councillor Smith.
Over improvement of degradation of the local natural environments. We don't really have to say over where they're going to build, where they are posing. If all strategic planning is taken away from district levels and put into a larger mayoral authority, what voice will we have as a district to say, actually, we don't want you building on that bit of green belt, or we don't want you building there, or, you know, so I think that might be quite dangerous actually for natural environment in Norwich.
Thank you. Lou.
Yeah, and we're back to that same point again, aren't we, Karen, about representation on that, on the mayoral authority, because that's where the voice will come in.
Everything circling back to the response to question 2. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, similar, I suppose, kind of concern in terms of the responsibilities about what Councillor Davis just raised, and circling back to question 2. But just reading this answer, one thing that strikes me that isn't mentioned is farming and food production, food security. So again, I know we're responding as Norwich City Council, and we obviously don't represent a farming area, but we are surrounded by it, and food security, affordable, high quality food, protecting the countryside is something we are obviously concerned about. I just wonder if that is something that was considered, had been considered, or or I'm completely wrong and it's completely irrelevant. But just a thought.
There is a reference, I think, in here to agricultural sustainability. So there is a hat tip to the sort of farming nature of our 2 counties. We proposing that we sort of strengthen that a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe a reference to food security in there, a lot to sit in to complement, I guess, that agricultural sustainability. Yeah, that's fine. That can go in. Great. Assuming the committee we're sort of suggesting this. I mean, the committee happy that explicitly referencing food security in there. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Yeah.
The only thing, I mean, agriculture is really, really important across Norfolk, but of course we don't produce all of our food needs. I mean, Norfolk is probably pretty heavy on sugar beet production and grain production, and probably pig farming would be the next biggest, I would guess.
Poultry.
We can sort of say, you know, we want to divide the sector up into producing a whole range of foods, because different foods are best produced in different parts of the country, indeed different parts of Europe, and so will always need to be imported. We couldn't grow all the things that we need to sustain a whole economy, for example, but I do think we need to strengthen the aspect of real pursuits, shall we say, and also the fact that our environment, I mean, when you consider, I'm considering the entirety of Norfolk and Suffolk as well, just getting away from farming for a moment. We have a huge range of diverse range of environments, from the Broads to fenlands to sort of scrub to woodland, coastal environments, all sorts of things. So yeah, it is quite an interesting question, this one, and some interesting comments on it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Padder.
And it comes out in this one particularly. There's a lot of information in here. How that links up to the vision for Norwich and our ambition for net zero and all of that. I think it would be structured slightly differently to be able to fit into a stronger narrative. So yeah, it's but you know,
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Davis and Councillor Smith. I think that probably sits on a what will come out of the local government reorganisation rather than. No. They'll. Lou, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're yet to get clarity over exactly what powers the mayoral combined authority will have, but I would expect that county farmland would be within whatever new arrangements were in place for the unitary authorities. So if there were one, it would sit in one. If there were three, they would be sitting across those three, I would suggest, but I don't know, yet to be decided.
Councillor Smith and then Councillor Sands.
Thanks. There's 2 quick points, if I may, just picking up on what Councillor Sands said about farms. Again, sorry, just to complicate things, but having grown up in Lowestoft, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention fishing. So the similar points that I made about obviously protecting fishing as industry, but the effects that fishing has on the ocean environment, potentially something to mention in this area. Norfolk, of course, obviously has also Yarmouth, as we know, fishing industry very important. Councillor Padder's point about a narrative, I should have mentioned this earlier, I think probably under question 4, but in question 4, the last paragraph, I think is really well written, and I think really does set out quite a powerful narrative. So again, I'm trying to make up for my past pernickety comments on the writing, but I think that's really well written, where it says that if these are designed with a real commitment to place-based leadership and grassroots involvement, it could significantly improve. And in that question, it was social outcomes across the region. You could replace social outcomes with whatever we're talking about in whatever question. Then, however, if regional ambitions overshadow local needs, the proposed MCA risks persisting, in that case, spatial inequalities and disenfranchising. But yeah, the overmighty mayor could overlook the specific local needs. So again, just to the things we were talking about this, we're in favour of devolution, but we're cautious about the mayor missing the local differences. I just think that's a really, that was a really good paragraph that kind of makes that point, and perhaps could be used again if people didn't want to get the response too formulaic, of course.
Thank you for that. I forgot who was next now. Councillor Sands, I think.
I was going to comment on what Councillor Davis mentioned about county farms, but first of all, I'll go back to what Councillor Smith said about fishing. I mean, it's not just the counties, that the land that we're considering, it's a degree of offshore, isn't it? Because so much of the economy is derived offshore, not just from fishing, but also from wind farms and other sorts of things. So I think, that's a very, very important element. And Councillor Davis was exactly right to raise the question of county farms. I don't know what the position of county farms is in Suffolk. I've got no idea. But I know in Norfolk, the three major land owners are county through county farms. This isn't in order of priority, by the way. The church and the Crown, they are the three biggest land owners across the county. So there's, as well as county farms, there's other considerations. Certainly the church probably owns a stack of farmland as well, as does the Crown. I mean, I'm not certain they're going to secede Sandringham, for example, but there are a whole range of considerations that really are important. They go beyond the boundaries of Norwich.
Yeah, and we'll certainly pick those up when I think we're looking at getting into the detail of the LGR aspect of the work that's being undertaken at the moment. Anyone else at the moment on the response to this question? No, well, let's move on, in which case, to the question 7, which is the last question, I think, which looks at whether the MCCA will support the interests and needs of local communities and reflect local identities. Councillor Fulton McAllister and then Councillor Carrington.
Thanks, Chair. So I think on this question, we need to be a lot more optimistic, frankly, because ultimately what we have at the moment with many of the powers that the MCCA will have is the local economic partnership, and that is completely undemocratic. It's largely business leaders. I know authorities do get attendance there, but ultimately there's very little democratic accountability to those structures. With the MCCA, every council leader will be elected by their constituents. The mayor of Norfolk and Suffolk will be elected by their constituents, and it will be their decision as a group as to whether to expand that group or not. Therefore, there is multiple ways that you could throw out decision makers that you don't like, and for that reason, I think that they are going to absolutely represent the needs of their communities and those local identities much more than someone from Aviva will, frankly. And ultimately, for that reason, I think we need to be much more optimistic about this rather than what is, in many ways, I think, a pessimistic response, especially given where we're coming from, and the context of where we're coming from is vital here.
So would you change the sort of text of the narrative, or at the very base, upgrade it from neither disagree to?
I think we need to be putting the context in of where the local economic partnership currently sits in terms of its accountability to local communities, which is almost zero. It's only the fact that we do have council leaders there, but they are outnumbered, frankly. And I think that we need to be shifting it from neither agree nor disagree to agree. There are lots of improvements that could be made with this model. I personally don't like the idea of a mayor spanning 2 counties. I think that's going to be difficult democratically and representing that number of people. But ultimately, it's an improvement.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually, because until you talked about the LEP, I hadn't really thought about where the LEP sits within the context of this piece of work, and that actually it would, this signals that effectively the demise, and yeah.
The LEP
Yeah,
no
it's
longer
just-
exists as the Norfolk Business Board and the Suffolk Business Board, and they were set up in anticipation of the previous devolution deal. So actually, they didn't need to dismember, as it were, disestablish the LEP. But then there will need to be new.
Just to show how high or not profile they've been. The fact that that completely passed me by. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right.
No.
If I just check with Matthew, the point you're making, Matthew, is that kind of those layers of democratic elected representatives strengthen the opportunities for this to be truly reflect the needs of local communities. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Carrington next, please.
Thank you. So this is more, I guess, of an observation and comment, because it doesn't really fit within the scope of the document, but it is something that residents have raised with me, and it probably aligns most closely with question 7. And that's the fact really that the consultation is looking at the system of managing services, managing local authorities, but not the system of appointing the person in charge, i.e. the system of electing the mayor. And I appreciate that is potentially outside the scope of this, but this is something that residents wanted me to raise. I don't think there's anything we could add about that at all. And I guess that's something that would need primary legislation, but I just wanted to make that observation on behalf of residents.
Thank you. I think it probably does sit outside the scope of this, but it's a very valid point. Got Councillor Galvin next, please.
Yeah, just on this question 7, I'm not sure, Matthew, I didn't read this as an economic one necessarily. So, I'd put the LEP in earlier up. This says support the interests and needs of local communities and reflect local identities is what the question said. So I think there is a risk here that smaller communities are going to be left out on this with this big mayoral level. I take your point that there's more, they'll get to vote, but they're already they're already not really represented. I agree. I'm not sure that I don't know the spirit of the question is about economics as much as about
I never made any points about economics.
The LEP is an economic.
Yes, but the MCCA will absorb a lot of the LEP's powers, and ultimately that will be able to be used to benefit communities. But my point wasn't primarily economic; it was primarily about there being some increased level of democratic accountability, which is really positive.
So on that, so what I was going to say is that we're already seeing those. I mean, it's not so bad in Norwich because this is more perhaps for, outskirts where people aren't represented at all, and they're sort of ignored. They don't get dentists, they don't get services like that. And they don't get a way of speaking. I don't really think we should go any stronger on this than neither agree nor disagree, because I don't see any evidence of how that would help those communities at this present time. And it possibly might make things worse for them. So we may be area committees or boards or parishes, parish clusters. If those things come in, that might help them. But otherwise, I'm not sure we can really. I understand why it says neither agree nor disagree there. Put it like that.
It's an interesting position, isn't it? Because we're some bodies that we perhaps haven't felt over the years to function particularly well have gone, and will be. Those responsibilities will be taken on by the MCCA, which is bringing with it powers that are currently exercised on our behalf at Whitehall. So that it's getting. So although the system isn't perfect, those powers and the accountability are closer to us than they otherwise are at the moment. So I think it is a positive, it should be a positive thing, because yeah, it may end up returning as politically people that we don't agree with, but nonetheless, that's the decision for the people of Norfolk and Suffolk, and not something that's perhaps more disconnected from Whitehall. But maybe that's the glass half full view.
I think, yeah, and the voting, that's where the voting system comes in as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, anyway, Councillor Sands, you were next, please. Oh, sorry, did someone want to come in? Yeah, sorry, Lynn.
Just a really quick reminder that the other element of this to consider is that the Council of Nations will be the structure that will be chaired by the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, where each regional mayor will have a seat at that table, where the decisions will be made at national level around funding and priority, and checking in on local plans, checking in on delivery. So there is also it's just a reminder, it's not necessarily relevant just to that question, but just a reminder for everyone that the mayor has that seat at that national table.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Sands.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with what Louise says, because question 7 is a really interesting one for a number of reasons. First of all, it does embrace the fact that we're talking about Norfolk Suffolk region, and the mayor has responsibility across a region, so they won't look down necessarily into the fine granular detail. That will be up to the unitaries, and within the unitaries, the subsections of that to sort of look at it. So in a sense, it represents something which I've always been in favour of, which is a federal states of Britain, because that's what I grew up in, the federal system. But I've reversed the question really, because I think there's a sub question in this, which comes down to the granularity of things, and that is, will it support the interests and needs of local communities and reflect local identities? Because of course the mayor won't do that, because they're spread over an entire area. It's then up to the unitary authorities and then the subsections within that to reflect and to promote the interests of local communities and their particular identities. So, I mean, why does Great Yarmouth have a sort of a fish on its coat of arms? It's because of lots of traditions and what they're relating to early industry. Why does Norwich have a castle on its coat of arms? So again, it reflects local identities, and you go across the different parts of the county, the different subsections, and they will all have a local identity, but the mayor, overall mayor, won't be concerned with that. And that's a conflicting part of this question, which is why I've written myself a reverse the question in terms of asking, will it support the interests? Essentially, the mayor won't, but they are responsible for getting support from Westminster and getting a share of the national tax take from Westminster, and probably also having some local tax raising powers as well to support the region. And then what happens within the region is another series of questions again, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I've got Councillor Smith next, then Councillor Catt, then Councillor Kane, then Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So going back to Matthew's points earlier, which I support, and I think your summary about the idea that this is better than what went before in terms of it being elected politicians rather than quangos or other agencies in a way. And going back to the wording of the question, that's my interpretation of why I think it is a positive thing. I just, if someone's got a comment or ask, it might not be appropriate to our answer, but this isn't, even though we're dealing obviously with a process that hasn't started and hasn't finished yet, and we know when it finishes it's obviously going to be after a consultation, we don't know what's going to end up looking like. From other devolved areas, when mayors have been set up with whatever powers they've had, they have all then evolved and changed and then had more powers. So is it worth, or is it appropriate for us to include a section that says that we acknowledge that, you know, in other areas when these have been set up over time, they've evolved to further represent local needs, and we would hope and we would expect to see that whatever we do have here, when it's set up in 2028, that's not shutting the door for 50 years. There is still some possibility to evolve it further.
That a thing that can be added in about sort of an evolution over time.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have, who did I say next? Councillor Catt.
Yeah, I wanted to just come in after Councillor Galvin's point, but Councillor Sands kind of picked it up a bit as well. That just the concept of a mayor for two counties, that in itself doesn't go hand in hand with reflecting local identities at all. And so I think the potential is definitely there for it to, if they put some systems in place to make sure that those things like parish councils, town councils are all represented. Local government reorganisation is obviously outside of the scope of it, but it is related. That and Mike's point that unitary authorities are going to be the ones that are going to need to reflect those local communities. They aren't going to be able to do that as well, and we have already seen that with other areas. And I think the point about the voting system as well is important. It's not probably the most undemocratic elections that you can have in a fair democracy are ones where you're voting for one person and you get one vote. That's what it is likely to be. And so again, that is only just going to push out even more of those nuances across these two counties. So I think the potential is definitely there, but I don't have enough reassurance or evidence from other areas to think that we should say agree. I think we have to. I would keep it at neither agree nor disagree.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kane.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously I'm substituting today, so excuse me if I'm ignorant or dim, but it seems like from what we've discussed today and this question as well, so much comes back to question 2. It seems like everything really hinges on that, and I just kind of wanted to make that observation because clearly our response to that and the strength of our response to that question is fundamentally important because so much hinges on it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis.
Hundreds of councillors who people could be, who people could ask to directly represent them. So I think this, this interim stage, I think will be a lot less democratic, and I don't see how people can affect community identities and local needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Stannard.
That may be the case, but let's remember that the combined authority is not going to replace the county council or the district council. So those will still be in place. And then under the unitaries, that democratic representation of all those councillors will be in place. Just wanted to make that point. Yeah,
I think part of the issue is that you've got these powers that will be given to the MCCA are not powers that are currently district or county powers. There's no elected accountability beyond like Whitehall, for example. So it is being brought somewhat closer. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the biggest cheerleader for this. I think this is an improvement, but I think there's a lot more work to be done. And I think we need to remember that the powers currently is dealt with by Whitehall bureaucrats. It's dealt with by business leaders under the current system. It's not dealt with by people who are locally elected, other than, for example, MPs who might have influence in those departments.
Can I bring in Councillor Sands, who's been indicating? Then I'd quite like to draw a line under this item, because I think we're not going to be able to rework the MCCA here this afternoon.
I was only going to agree with what Councillor Davis was saying, because conceivably this small group of people could all come from one part of the county. They could all come from South Norfolk. And we know, for example, Kay Mason Billig and a few other people in South Norfolk are totally hostile to the entire idea of a combined authority, full stop. And they are certainly totally hostile to 3 unitaries across the county. So they are not going to represent anyone's interest.
But without splitting too many hairs, of course, it's 2 from Norfolk and 2 from Suffolk, so they can't all come from South Norfolk. But Lou.
Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful. Emily and I were just talking, and of course, it's almost like you almost need to wipe the slate clean and reframe thinking about local government. This is a brand new approach to it. So you'll have a devolved authority, a strategic authority that will have some powers, that some of which we know are around highways and transport and business and skills and employment and strategic housing and growth plans, economic growth plans for the area. So some might be things that are currently done at county level. Some are things that are done at central government level. So it's a brand new approach to things, and the unitaries will also be new. You know, the split of responsibilities will be merged into one tier. So it's kind of completely reframing your thinking about local government and what's local.
Thank you. So we just need to see whether we've made a few drafting comments throughout the way, which I think have been taken on board. I don't know if there's any sort of formal recommendations we really need to vote on. Obviously, there was one about for question 2, changing the response to disagree, because I think there was a general theme through this meeting that we didn't feel that the governance arrangements are that solid, and so we disagree. Shall we? We'll take if we take a vote on that. Are people happy that that goes forward? Should we change that to disagree for question 2? Yeah, thank you. That's carried. Now, question 3. So I think Councillor Galvin, you'd suggested that should be softened slightly, didn't you, to neither agree nor disagree, and then Councillor Fulton McAllister made the counter argument that should stay where we are. Yeah, that's supporting the economy.
Yeah. So, but the evidence is there. But I think this is a very sort of, you know, as you say, it depends on other factors. So it really matters that much. Yeah. It probably aggregates, doesn't it, into a general mood.
Yeah.
So, one way or the other, but
Okay, so we leave that as. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's see what else I've missed out. We've taken on board, I think the reference to sort of food security, that's just going to go in anyway. We don't, that was sort of taken on board. So. Okay. Is that a formal recommendation then, do we think, or it's just comments that have been noted down? Yeah, okay, great, thank you. I think the only other, I think we probably spent quite a lot of time, there was nothing else really I've noted until we got to question 7. So lots of discussion on question 7. Oh, have I missed something out?
oh no. Yeah, no. So I would like to say that on 6, just to actually ask about, so local, natural and overall national environment. I do question quite strongly that the inclusion of some of those specifics in there, because I really don't think there's any scientific basis for saying carbon capture, usage and storage, hydrogen and nuclear new build could improve.
It's effectively that whole sentence that spans the bottom of page 27 and the top of 28.
Yes, I think some. I mean, you can say some of them are going to improve the environment, but others will not. And I think it's sort of a bit of a rag bag of things. So, I mean, you need to have things that are renewable and will help the environment rather than unproven technologies that won't, and evidence-based not to. So I just question where we got that list from. But yeah, that might be a bit of too, I don't know whether that's been agreed with our.
I think, Emma, did you answer that already and said that came out of work with other districts already?
I mean, there's some assumptions there that need questioning. I'd say I'd like to know what they are, how we're assuming that they will drive clean energy innovation. Yeah, and also just the question on the protected areas. I don't know, it'd be nice to perhaps reference them somewhere that are, if we could, because they're jointly owned by all the people of Norfolk. You don't have to be in the Broads to have an interest in the Broads. Protected landscapes are for everybody.
Just think about how we work that up, because we're at the sort of formal recommendation stage at the moment. So how we work.
Like to be a protected areas in there, protected landscape.
Yeah, Lou.
I would suggest we just include a reference in the paragraph to protected areas. If you're comfortable with that, Lucy, we just flag it in there. I think we can do that prior to.
It's always really tricky when you're trying to do this level of recommendation at scrutiny, because whether you like it or not, you're ending up sort of effectively trying to redraft someone's work on the fly, and it never quite works brilliantly. Councillor Carrington.
Yeah, I was just wondering again on the wording that Councillor Galvin was talking about with strength spanning offshore wind, etc. Whether it might be worth potentially changing that to potential strengths, just to capture the views of the committee as a whole.
How do you feel about potential?
I mean, that's an easy way to do it, isn't it? If that's because we don't want to unpick what's already been agreed with districts, but
potential leaves it open for debate. Yeah. How did the committee feel about adding the word potential? Yeah. Just at the Councillor Carrington has suggested adding the word potential at the start of the final line on page 27. So with potential strength spanning offshore wind, North Sea, hydrocarbon transition, carbon capture, etc., etc. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Thank you. So I think we're agreed. Thank you for that, and we're agreed on adding potential. Well, of course, we're recommending to cabinet. The cabinet adds the word potential into this, of course. So you know, they may have a different view. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we'll just quickly go on to question 7. Interests of local communities. I think Councillor Fulton McAllister, you felt that ought to be more optimistic. Yeah, well, that was my note.
I think we need to acknowledge where we're coming from, the fact that a lot of these powers are not with any real local influence, and that local influence will be increased. And like Lou said, we do need to get into a new mindset of what is local. Local could obviously be my street on Dereham Road. Obviously, even in the council chamber, quite often the interests of my street aren't represented, even though I live on it. The reality is that we do need to think of this as an improved situation. And I would argue that it gives more weighting to the areas where we are pessimistic, where we've highlighted quite serious governance issues with districts not being represented. It increases those if we are erring on the optimistic side, where credit is due. I will just end by saying it's not a perfect system. I don't want to be the main cheerleader for the MCCA. I think there are a lot of issues with it, and that could be addressed, but it is an improvement.
So change that to agree rather than neither agree nor disagree. And there was also about having a paragraph in about sort of evolution over time. Yeah. Are members happy that we agree on that rather than have have no firm opinion, and add a paragraph in about recognising that it can evolve over time? Yeah, everyone happy with that? Put some hands up just so we can note that. Yeah, that's agreement there. Thank you. Right. Does anyone else have anything they wish to say about anything else on this report that we haven't covered in our analysis of those 7 questions? Councillor Sands.
What I've got to say changes absolutely nothing.
Brilliant.
It's just a personal comment. I simply find the term mayor for a region a bit of a bizarre term. I associate mayor with a city or a place. Again, speaking from practical, my experience, lived experience, I'd like to see a different term, and the word premier comes to mind.
Governor.
We used to have a premier of South Australia, so yeah. As I said, it changes nothing. It's just my own personal view.
Governor General.
General Harks a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's
the prison.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments? Emily.
Chair, there was just one other point that the committee made, and I think it came from Councillor Davis, which was about the number of non-constituent members.
Yes, that was under question 2, wasn't it? That was
yeah,
right.
So the committee might want to consider a recommendation that adjusts bullet point 1 at the bottom of page 24 to say something along the lines of, and a minimum of 1 seat per district, city, borough, authority.
I'd be happy with that. All those in favour, please indicate. Yeah, that is carried. Thank you very much. So I think that's probably wraps up our discussions on the MCCA submission, and that can go to Cabinet. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say next week, but it's not next week, is it? It's in, no, yeah, week after. I sort of lost track of when April starts. I mean, obviously. Okay, so we're going to look at the work programme. Well, I don't propose to say too much about it, but that's page 37. Microphone's gone off. The only thing I wanted to highlight to the committee is it doesn't particularly relate to the work programme, but there was no other place to pop it in. So I've been contacted, as had Councillor Galvin, I think, by a doctor at the Vulnerable Adult Service who is offering the committee an opportunity to go and have a look at their service because of the concerns they have at the moment about its future, etc. Proposed cuts and the current consultation. So I said to her that I would make you aware of that. I've got contact details that I won't obviously read out in this meeting, but I'll happily forward those on to people and we can make our own arrangements to go and have a look. Councillor Fortham-Cowles. No, I think it would just be sort of, for those members that were interested, could make an arrangement. It may well be that we might end up unofficially coordinating something so as not to, well, I mean, we'll see how that works. Then, yeah. It may end up suiting them to have smaller numbers at any one time anyway, rather than a large number. But Councillor Galvin.
It might be if quite a few of us wanted to go, it'd be better to go together than because obviously they're busy and that will eat into their work time. So they might be able to actually offer us a time. I don't know if we can try and find one together, it might be better because they might do a little presentation or whatever. We could ask them.
Yeah, but anyway, I thought that's really important, I think, to sort of make you aware of that, and then we can set up. And actually, I think that probably now segues in nicely to your report from HOSC that you were at today.
Oh yes, thank you. So so HOSC was.
That's the sound. Sorry,
You're all right. Do you need a hand? Do you need a hand with something? No. Okay. Thought your laptop had died and you were looking for. Yeah. So obviously HOSC was this morning, and they looked at 3 items: the Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust. That's the NSFT, which is the mental health trust, basically. And I don't know if you're aware, they've had years and years of failure, basically, which was listed out in there, and they're now on a massive transformation programme which covers crisis community, children's, inpatients, and across both counties. So they, because of the history of the trust, it's all provided in different ways in different places. So it was a really interesting presentation. In the past, they've had different staffing levels in different places. There's been no oversight, no assurance that they're evidence-based. This is all their words, or even appropriate, some of the services. So that's all within a clinical transformation programme, which is going to be co-produced and it ensure that it will be evidence-based and will meet standards. And they very much said they're at the start of the programme and they're not delivering it yet. They said it's not delivering, but it is a well-governed programme, and there'll be a transformation and strategy that they will be in a position in the future that they hope it will be there. And they apologised again to everyone. So, I mean, they did seem very sincere, and I think that the HOSC will go and visit some hospitals, Helston and the Julian Hospital, and speak to staff. That's what we asked for the work programme. And they have a chief patient experience officer, which is interesting, who looks at service users and their families, because I don't know if you know, but they had a really huge problem with unlisted deaths. They didn't know how many people had died, so then it was down to the public to find that out, and it's been on a long journey.
And when I covered for you, I think at a previous meeting, they introduced us to that officer, and
okay.
yeah, so and it was really interesting to sort of hear hear how they've eventually managed to find all the details for those.
That was it. But I can write up a couple of paragraphs on a bit more, and obviously it'll be on the notes. But the other one was the Norfolk and Waveney Hospitals Group Model of Operation, which has come. They weren't very happy, Hos, because they were more or less told this was happening before. There wasn't proper consultation on it, but they are basically having the 3 hospitals, James Paget, the NNN and the King's Lynn, are going to have an overarching model of operation, which will be it's not a new entity and it will belong to the hospitals that are there, but they'll delegate their decision making to a group arrangement. And again, they apologised for not consulting on that before, but it was interesting. And that what came up in that was place-based care. The concerning thing for us that they said the place-based care is very well in operation in East Norfolk and very operating well in West, but there's a hole in the middle for place-based care. They said it's not really being delivered properly, and in the centre, as they call it. And the King's Lynn is a Marmot town, and so they've made a bit of a presentation on how that's helping to deliver that, and they're going to come through with some information on how that could possibly work for Norwich. There's a person, the Borough Council, that will connect with us on that, and Tracy Bleakley from the Health said that Norwich is behind, but we're going to bring it up to level with that. And then the last thing was the work programme, which wasn't ready for the meeting, but what did come up as part of that was the current consultation, because HOSC has a role with consultations, that it's the last port of call after a consultation ends. And in the past, you look at that, so we also have a role, the committee also has a role to be able to call things into the Secretary of State through that. And the committee agreed to call this one in because various pieces of information were put before the committee, not least from Health Watch, that the current consultation is not fit for purpose. So and that's all there. So it'll go to the Secretary of State in advance of the end of it, the notification that it'll be called in, and then there'll be a meeting, I think in June, at the end of that consultation, that will be public. So that's what happened today. But I can send around a couple of paragraphs, or if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, it's very, very useful to hear that. Any questions? No, great. Well, thanks very much for your report, and yeah, certainly very timely on the whole issue of the consultation and the call-in. So, well, on with that, I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.